Hello and welcome to integrative process psychotherapy, a human way of understanding what we do as therapists. In this video, we'll explore complexity theory and how three core ideas, relationship, pattern, and process, help us see psychotherapy in a deeper, more realistic way. In the last video, I introduced the elements of complexity theory, systems thinking, chaos theory, and process philosophy. I used a few of these concepts to help understand certain aspects of panic attacks. Let's delve a little deeper into complexity theory itself. Complexity theory studies living systems made of many interconnected elements interacting in dynamic ways. Jean Bolton in the Tao of Complexity states that all events and entities in the universe are emerging, stabilizing, and dissolving patterns of relationship. From this perspective, there are no discrete entities, no actual separated, isolated objects. Everything we see and know are patterns of relationship in process. This is a description which is close to reality, but it doesn't change how we experience the world. We tend to see and think of things as separate objects in space. Example, there's me and there's you, and we're separate. We don't see relationships well as they are non-physical. For example, here's my finger and thumb, and they're in relationship. But we can't see the relationship so much as just the objects, the finger and the thumb. But we know that they are in relationship. It seems that our perceptual and conceptual systems evolved to maximize survival, to cut down on extraneous information. So it excludes and ignores whatever is not relevant for us to stay alive. This is true of the whole reductionist scientific approach to knowledge. We study everything as if isolated from everything else. In that way, it creates simpler, easier, cleaner ways of understanding and gives an illusion of truth. To see and understand a clearer glimpse of what is actually happening in and around us, we have to do, as William Blake says, cleanse the doors of perception and expand our mindset. In complex systems, the whole is more and different in quality from the sum of the parts. And properties emerge from the interactions between this entity and that entity, or this process and that process. Behavior can shift suddenly and unpredictably, just as this flock of starlings is self-organizing itself in flight without anybody being in control. Everything exists in relationship with itself and with its environment. So my environment at the moment is this computer, the air around me, gravity, light, all of those things. But internally, I have thoughts and feelings. I have processes going on in my body, all of these organic processes, each of which is related to every other in very complex ways. So complexity gives us an organic, holistic, ecological way of understanding life. Imagine a forest and the billions of living beings, microbes, fungi, roots, vegetation, trees, insects, animals, all are connected in a complex web of life, interacting, competing, cooperating, and predating on each other. And we, as living systems, are always in relation to everything around us, particularly other human beings. We cannot understand human beings as if they're machines. Machines are predictable, mechanical, and uncreative. And the machine analogy does not help us understand ourselves because we are intricate and complicated with many levels of being, from cells to organs to body, mind, and spirit. We're entangled and engaged constantly with the world around us. And how we engage is dependent on our thoughts, feelings, and particularly on our expectations. We're always looking towards the future. We cannot explain things as though they are just a result of things which happened in the past. Human beings adapt to circumstances, but also manipulate the environment according to our needs. So everything is constantly changing moment to moment. For example, consciousness cannot be found in a single neuron or even in a bunch of neurons. It emerges from the interaction of billions of neurons with chemicals, electrical impulses, and processes which we only just are beginning to understand. In terms of psychology, we have to approach each person as a living, adaptive system where thoughts, emotion, body processes, history, relationships, and the current situation interact in constantly shifting patterns. At this moment, you are in relationship with everything around you, your environment, the room that you're in, or wherever you are. You're in relationship to the screen in which you're seeing and hearing this video. Energy and information flow from the screen to your eyes, to your ears, and to your nervous system. And it makes sense of all of those different parts of information, all those bits of information, because your senses take in millions of bits of information per second. Yet your conscious mind processes only a tiny fraction of all of that information. While we can be conscious of the selected bits which interact with our moment-to-moment experience, our unconscious may be actually doing something very different, interacting with past memories, emotions, expectations, and body states. And they're all shaping what you and I experience right now. We're conscious of some experiences, maybe what we're thinking and feeling. We're semi-conscious of some experiences which are going on in the back of our minds, but we're unconscious of most experiences. We live in and through our biological bodies with instincts and physiology, yet we also have what I call ego consciousness. That's consciousness of ourself as a separate being with the capacity to seek meaning, beauty, and purpose. From a single fertilized cell, we develop into beings of unimaginable complexity. During fetal life, the brain forms about 250,000 neurons per minute. Billions of processes had to unfold and evolve in exact coordination to result in you and me as unique individuals. As therapists, we are called to approach each individual as a unique, irreducible being who deserves to be understood in all their full uniqueness. We can only know that other person in therapy through relationship. So what do I mean by relationship? In complexity theory, relationship is primary. Relationship is any interaction where both sides of the relationship are affected in some ways. A relationship creates a difference that makes a difference. And this can be applied at every scale. So particles in an atom, organs in a body, each organ relating to all the others. Another example is a family where the members interact in very complex ways, where there's an entanglement of expectations and culture. There's a way of speaking, a way of relating. And of course, as therapist and client, we have to pay attention to the relationship. A living system always has internal relationships between and among its parts. It has external relationships with its environment. It has an ongoing exchange of matter, energy, and information. What does that mean in actuality? For instance, you and I right now are in a relationship, a loose but real sense of connection. My images and words influence your experience. They don't influence it in a one-to-one way. They influence it in a complex way, depending on your history and your way of thinking. My expectation of you watching this video influences what I do and how I do it. In therapy, there are multiple levels of relationship. The primary relationship is that of the client with themselves and their own experience. They come to therapy because something has gone wrong in that relationship. They're experiencing some sort of dysfunction or suffering or confusion because parts of their experience are not connected. Then in therapy, there's also the relationship with you. They come into therapy hoping and expecting to have an accepting relationship in which they can heal the wounds that have often been caused to them through negative relationships. A client has their relationship with others in their lives, which we need to know about. Relationships with their families, their friends. Sometimes there's past relationships with other therapists. And of course, there's early relationships with parents, which may have a profound impact on how they experience themselves. And finally, there's the relationship with the world. When relationships lose coherence, connection, integration, the whole of the living system suffers. So we can think of diabetes as a way in which the connections inside the bodies have actually broken down. And we can think of depression, for example, as a disturbance of relationship. Relationship with self, relationship with others, but also relationship with meaning and life energy. You could say that the internal and external patterning of experience for a depressed person has lost coherence, has lost meaning, has lost a sense of aliveness. Pattern is a complex concept. Think of it as an organized configuration of relationships, a coherent arrangement that forms some sort of whole. If you change the pattern, a different whole emerges. So for example, sodium chloride and sodium chlorate are patterns of relationship between sodium atoms and chlorine. Sodium chloride is salt. We need it to survive. Sodium chlorate is a weed killer. It's also poisonous to us humans and can be actually used to create explosives. So we think of ourselves as human, but what about our nearest relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos? They have very similar genomes, but the patterning is different. And we can think of therapy as a pattern of relationship, which is very different from a casual conversation. A person's identity, their personality, and their symptoms are patterns of relationship between memories, beliefs, emotions, bodily states, and social experience. Diagnostic categories, for example, are very useful shorthand for us to communicate with other professionals about the difficulties that our clients are facing, but they're fragments of a pattern, not the whole person. We have to realize that when we diagnose somebody, it's just shorthand. It isn't the actual pattern itself. The pattern itself is far more complex than that. And as a very famous systems theory said, the map is not the territory. Our beliefs about things are not actual reality. Process is possibly the most important of all the concepts for understanding psychotherapy. I'll be going into process in a lot more detail in the next video. So nothing in a complex system is static. Nothing stays still. Patterns are always emerging, stabilizing, and then dissolving. This ongoing movement is what we call process. So everything in the world is changing, some changing at a faster rate than others. And because we're changing at a particular rate, when we look at things which seem to be static, it's because they are changing at a slower rate. Human beings are constantly in motion. Our experience is never fixed. It's a flowing of shifting relationships and pattern over time. At this moment, I'm trying to convey ideas and information to you. So I'm using pattern vibrations of the air and nonverbal expressions to try and convey meaning. In the same way, therapy is not about inserting information. It's about participating in a living process where patterns evolve, change, reorganize, shift. We know that the client brings to us their experience, their story. Therapeutic change occurs when new relational experiences are integrated into a person's existing pattern. So we can think of change as having first order and second order. First order change is constant. It's what's changing moment to moment. It's actually just the normal pattern of changing as the time moves. Example, my thoughts, my speech, whatever's going on. But in therapy, we're seeking what you might call second order change. This is a shift, a change in the whole patterning of the system in the person, the whole psychological and even physical system. We're not trying to change just isolated parts of the person. Interventions that focus on only certain aspects may or may not generate second order change in the system. If there's not enough momentum in that change, there's a tendency to revert to old patterns of behavior. Now, I'm going to just take a moment to allow you to think about some of the things I've been talking about: relationship, pattern, and process. And imagine for yourself how you might use those ideas in your own psychotherapy. So let me summarize how relationship, pattern, and process apply to psychotherapy. The first point is that clients are complex, and they're complex living systems. I'm a complex living system, so are you. So our formulations, the way we understand our clients, has to reflect that complexity. We need to develop flexible, systemic thinking. Another point is that we become a very important part of the client's environment. We influence their inner organization. They think about us, they dream about us, sometimes they carry our voice in their head. Certainly, they begin after the first few sessions to really value the relationship aspect and to be able to bring some of their experiences that they may never have been able to voice in the past. Therapy is pattern recognition and transformation. What I mean by that is we help clients recognize and reorganize their patterns of relationship, emotion, meaning, bodily experience, thinking. We want them to reorganize them so they're more functional, that they're less stressful, that they're more integrated and coherent, that there's actually a sense of one person, one being having an experience in the world. And as therapists, we develop pattern and relationship apperception. Apperception means perceiving content and context. That means what's in front of us and all the surrounding aspects that may be influencing whatever we're seeing. We need to be thinking in terms of parts and wholes. We need to be thinking about what is happening now and how it emerged over time. And all of this includes intuition, feelings, and a kind of tacit knowing. A knowing which is below our normal kind of knowing. It's not just cognition. It's not just thinking stuff. As soon as a client comes into the room, the therapist is part of a therapeutic system. And the effectiveness of therapy reflects our own inner coherence and how that relates to the unintegrated aspects of our client. So we need to develop a quiet mind and an open heart, which allows us to sense the patterns unfolding between this person and me. We have to be affected by each client in a unique way. As we develop as psychotherapists, we can choose how to use that information, how to reflect it back, how to let the client know what our experience is like, what other people's experiences are like. Before moving on to whatever you do next, just take a moment. Just be still. To be still is not easy. Notice your own aliveness. It's the kind of background hum of life in your body. You can feel it particularly in your fingertips and your hands, but there may be parts of your body which feel more alive and have that life energy flowing more easily than others. Ask yourself, how might I bring these ideas of complexity theory, relationship, pattern, and process into my work? When I see my next client, what might I notice that's different from before? What might I do that's different from before? This video only touches the surface. For deeper study, you can see integrative process psychotherapy resources on my website, roland-evans.com. And I highly recommend that you read The Tao of Complexity by Jean Bolton and some parts of Seeking Wholeness, which I wrote some time ago. In the following videos, we'll explore relationship, pattern, and process in even greater depth and how it relates to our experience of therapy.